Well, guys, this is going to be a bit of a blast from the past in terms of context I have to give you guys before we get into this news story. You see, a long time ago, there was a YouTuber who was one of the most prominent in all of the online right. You could argue she was one of the big three leaders of the alt-right, and today she is sparsely known. She retired years ago to pursue family, came back for a while, and I don't really know if she's around anymore, as far as I know. Last I heard from her was like some drama that happened that she was not on the right side of, in terms of the internet's view, so I don't know how people are feeling about her these days, but I can tell you, she's probably not the absolute titan she was back in the day. You see, Lauren Southern is who we're talking about. She was the original, I guess you could say, comparable to Brett Cooper, where, you know, pretty white woman making conservative content on the internet, appealing to horny, conservative men, validating all of their biases. Yeah, she had them eating out of the palm of her hand. Day one. Easy. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Now, if you weren't really paying attention to politics back then you probably don't even know who this is, but let me tell you, she was huge. She was Brett Cooper huge, maybe larger by today's standards. Now, what she ended up working on was a lot of different things. From on the ground, just kind of walking around different locations, making videos about how immigration is ruining them, to really just videos ranting about social, political causes and whatnot, talking about how the PC SJWs are going too far. But what truly did the biggest numbers for her were her documentaries. In fact, what she did was so successful, it created the model that Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire would later follow with their actually extremely successful Lady Ballers and What is a Woman and Am I Racist? So what she ended up making that ended up going crazy viral was Farmlands, a documentary, quote unquote, by Lauren Southern about South Africa and the claim that white farmers living in rural South Africa were being attacked, robbed, murdered, raped, kidnapped, and in some cases butchered by, and there's always a lot of emphasis on this, black South Africans. And so it's a very fear-mongering documentary, very much tilted in its presentation, where it tries to fearmonger people into believing that South Africa is that country where black people are actually oppressing white people. You see, at the time, and to this day, conservative white people really want to be able to point at something that is blatant oppression of white people, specifically done by people of color, so they can feel some level of moral superiority whenever they're racist. But when it doesn't happen, they'll just make it up. And this documentary, though it wasn't the start of the claim, was where the claim of white South African genocide got popular. And to rewind things even further, you know, South Africa for a very long time existed with slavery and apartheid, right? Black South Africans, you know, South Africans, were literally like third-class citizens, basically. It was horrific, right? I think we all know about, like, how the U.S. literally called out, like, not the U.S., the UN even, like, called out the apartheid in South Africa. It was so bad. Like, and you know, the UN is fairly comfy with Israel. It goes to show how blatant it was with South Africa, how much worse it was. And nowadays, even though apartheid is effectively ended, those social divides still exist, you know? 90% of the wealth in South Africa, maybe more, belongs to the white people in South Africa. And a lot of them are not just, like, okay, but, like, pretty well off, right? Especially if they live rurally. They're, like, they own land, and we're talking, like, wealthy, land-owning ranchers and farmers here. These are powerful, wealthy people. Notably, friends of Elon Musk, no doubt. The wealthy community of South Africa, Elon's home country, whom he has a very patriotic connection to, if you pay attention. You better believe he considers himself like the king of South Africa unofficially, and I'm sure a lot of people who are wealthy there consider that the case. And so, this narrative that white South Africans are being oppressed, there are a lot of powerful parties that have all come together to push this narrative and convince people it's true. And this is all culminated in one of the most hilarious and ironic news stories ever. White South Africans have been, many, like thousands of white South Africans are now being granted exclusive refugee status by the Trump administration, not only being allowed into the United States, but also being granted exclusive citizen-only benefits. This is literally the Elon Musk is the vice president, basically. He likes South Africans and wants more, well, white South Africans, and wants more of them here. As you can imagine, the response on Twitter has been overwhelmingly just Nazis saying this is what real good immigration looks like. It's very much outing that they only want white people coming to the country. And I don't have a problem with these people coming to the country, to be clear. What I have a problem with is their claim as to why they're coming here. If you're coming here and you just want to live, like, a good life, you want to be American, sure, fine, I don't care. But the claim that is being used to justify this initiative and the amount of money that'll be spent to give these people special treatment compared to other immigrants, if, soon enough there will be any other immigrants, is a complete lie. It's a racist conspiracy theory that's provably wrong. And that is where I take the most... where I have my biggest issue with what's happening here. I'm not anti-immigration. I'm not even anti these people immigrating. It's the justification they're giving for why these immigrants ought to have special treatment. Let's watch and find out more.
You may recall that on the day he was sworn in, President Trump signed an executive order, effectively stopping any refugees from being allowed to come and resettle in the United States. Now, there's an act passed by Congress called the Refugee Act, which allows for as many as 125,000 refugees in this fiscal year, people who can prove they're being persecuted or fear persecution because of race or religion or political beliefs. And nowhere near that number has been allowed in by the time Mr. Trump took office and shut it all down. But just a few weeks later, President Trump announced that he was making an exception, and not only that, he would expedite the processing of refugee claims by one group of people from Africa. Now, you might think it's some women and children who've been maybe sexually assaulted in the conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, a place that's seen fighting for decades. On this program, we reported on the violence that plighted people there in a series of programs in 2006.
What has gone on here is simply extraordinary over the...
Okay, well, I get what he's doing here. This is not necessarily relevant to the story. Can I give you guys an analogy for what's happening here? This is like... Man, what's a good analogy? There's really nothing comparable. It's such insane bullshit. There's nothing comparable. They just made up a lie for why wealthy, well-off people should get special treatment to come to America and become even wealthier, powerful, and more influential. And the justification they're using is a victim narrative sob story that's not even true. I don't know what analogy I could give that's comparable to this situation. It's just that stupid.
Last 10 years here, there has been major fighting between a number of different groups. It has been the deadliest war in our lifetime, the deadliest war since World War II. Some 3 to 4 million people have died in this country.
Really?
And their deaths have virtually gone unnoticed.
Dude,
And
I need to read more about this. What? I need to read more about this Congolese civil war. I did not know it was this crazy. I knew that there was like a lot of interesting stuff happening, like that it might be the most interesting politically part of Africa, but I don't really know a lot about it, to be honest. But holy shit, the biggest war since World War II? Half of Africa was involved? Fuck, dude. I need to look into that shit. I need to fill in that gap in my knowledge.
Going on in eastern Congo between the government and an armed group called M23. Thousands have died, hundreds of thousands displaced, and widespread reports of sexual violence against women. But President Trump hasn't allowed refugees from there here, nor from Sudan, where there's been terrible fighting. The only Africans President Trump has paved a quick path for are these South Africans. And yes, they are white. They are Afrikaners, descendants of Dutch settlers to South Africa. This is the first group of people granted refugee status to enter the U.S. since the president entered his second term. On February 7th, President Trump signed.
Obviously, for those that don't know, this is what Elon Musk is. They're very posh. They have like posh British-like accents with a twinge of Australian. Sounds almost like a mix of Australian, New Zealand, and posh British. And they're the descendants of like wealthy, like slave owners. They're like a very, God, like white South Africans are not a very large population, are they even, right? Percentage of South Africa that is white. 7.3%, literally less than 10%. Percent of South Africa that holds wealth by race. In South Africa, there's a significant racial wealth gap. The typical black household earns only about 5% of the wealth held by the typical white household. So not only white people literally make up 7% of the population in South Africa, have 95% of the wealth, and according to Brian Rimlinger, who I'm going to have to trust, owns 78% of the privately owned land there. Now they are coming here with easy access and special privileges because the vice president oligarch, Elon Musk, is their buddy that they know. There's, guys, only 7% of the country is Afrikaners. This is a pretty small community of people. You could probably fit every Afrikaner who's like a right-wing chud millionaire in a group chat, and Elon's probably the owner of it, and they're probably organizing shit. I'm gonna be real. Like, these are the oligarchs of a very small population of wealthy, powerful people who are trying to get sympathy for oppressing a population that has been horrifically oppressed for like over a century. Centuries. So yeah, like when I emphasize here that yes, white South Africans or Afrikaners are a minority, when we use the term minority, we're not saying it to mean a group is a minority of the population. Generally, by definition and by necessity, that does end up being the case. Like gay people, black people, trans people, Hispanic people, in America at least, are a minority of the population, but the term minority refers to how much social, political, and economic power they wield as a demographic group compared to the socio-politically and economically dominant group currently in America, which is white people, let's be real. Holding the majority of wealth, holding the majority of power, having arguably the easiest ride to positions of wealth and power from not having it. White people in South Africa are the minority of the population, but they are not minorities. Not in the sense that we use that term and how it's meant, what it actually means.
And this executive order carving out an exception for the Afrikaners, the white minority who created the racist apartheid regime in South Africa and ruled there cruelly and brutally until 1994, when black South Africans, the overwhelming majority of South Africans, were allowed to vote for the first time, and they voted for that man, Nelson Mandela.
I thought he died in prison.
Afrikaners took land from black people in South Africa, repressed them, and in the 3 decades since the end of apartheid, they still have all the land they took. Black South Africans, who make up over 80% of the population, still only own around 4% of private land. Now,
over 90% of the population, right? Who else is there? Is there like an Asian or Latino population or something in South Africa that I don't know about? Like 5 people or something? Because if white people only make up 7% of South Africa's population, I can't imagine there's a lot else, to be completely honest. So, no, I think black people in South Africa make up over 90%, in fact. I'd go so far as to say. Just to add on to, why am I blanking on his name right now? How am I blanking on this guy's name? It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite remember. Something Cooper. This is not Trevor Noah. Yes. Trevor Noah. Oh my God. Oh, look, guys, it's Trevor Noah. Oh yeah, Cooper Anderson. Or Anderson Cooper. Yes. Thank you. Brett Cooper. Anderson Cooper, thank you. The name was on the tip of my tongue. I'm sorry.
President Trump was asked why these Afrikaners were allowed to enter the U.S.
Why are you creating an expedited path into the country for Afrikaners?
He's going to say because they're good immigrants that are good for the country.
But not others.
Because they're being killed, and we don't want.
No, he's going to literally push the conspiracy that we started. I told you I would have to give you guys the context of the conspiracy theory and where it comes from. Literally a Nazi alt-right conspiracy theory popularized at the ass end of the anti-SJW movement to make sympathy out of one of the most powerful demographics in the world. It's like if we tried to hold some kind of sympathy party over how, bodybuilders aren't strong enough to stand up for themselves if someone tries to fuck with them. It's like, really? This is the group we're raising awareness for? No, better yet, it's like if we tried to hold an anti-bullying campaign against gym bros. It's like, yeah, don't bully gym bros. But don't do it. It's like, really? We're telling people not to bully specifically gym bros? That's the demographic that we're advocating for here? I don't think they need it. That's the level of just audacity that's happening here.
Want to see people be killed. It's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And
so Trump is kind of outing the fact that it's not real here with the whole "you people don't want to write about it" in reference to all of mainstream media. It's been so widely debunked, but of course the idea that it's real serves Trump's narrative and the alt-right's narrative so heavily. They just keep saying it's real, it's real, it's real. You guys just won't talk about it. I mean, I don't know what to say at the end of the day. It's like, yeah, and a lot of people say the earth is flat. A lot of people say space isn't real. Candace Owens, for instance, who we'll be talking about later, big fan of Trump, in fact, or was a big fan of Trump. That doesn't change anything. At the end of the day, when you are just so dedicated to thinking you're right, that the world is wrong for not agreeing with what you think happened, then I think you're just lost. I think you should probably just not breed at that point, and that's the end of the conversation.
farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being...
Oh, and by the way, to be clear, just in case I give off the wrong impression, some of my best friends are Afrikaners, okay? I do not hate all white South African people. Now, in all seriousness, I do actually have friends that are white South Africans. They are leftists. They are progressive. They have lots of scathing political critiques of their country and the position of it. In fact, a lot of what I know about South Africa comes from those people. And so, obviously, no, I do not hate Afrikaners or anything like that. But having a, and in fact, I think most people who would be watching my video that are white and South African would not need me to say this. They already know. They're like, yeah, everything Zan's saying is true. He's complaining about shit that I'm annoyed about. So many people in this country, or so many Afrikaners in this country are cringe as fuck politically. He's totally right. But just for people that don't know, obviously I know that plenty of them are good people who are not right-wing nut jobs. Particularly, like, young Gen Z Afrikaners are fairly progressive, at least from what I can tell.
Being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media Television media doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that.
It's funny that they don't care about the race or anything, but it's a made-up story where they've specifically decided to create a narrative about black people killing white people. But it's not about race, guys.
What's happening is terrible. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence and come here.
The idea that there's a genocide of white farmers going on in South Africa is just not true. It's absurd. And that's been debunked by a number of organizations, both inside and outside of South Africa. But it's become a rallying cry for the some right-wing elements inside the country, and has echoed all the way to America. Let me just go back to Sudan for a moment. An actual genocide has happened there, according to the U.S., as two warring factions battled for control of that country earlier this year. The U.S. accused one side, the RSF, of committing genocide.
Isn't there Sudan and South Sudan
have been
now?
Internally displaced, while millions more have fled the
they're
country.
at war?
That's according to the UN. They
It's
aren't
bloody,
allowed to be
too.
refugees here. And on top of this, the Afghans who worked alongside U.S. troops during the war as interpreters and guides and fixers, Afghans who fought for the United States, helped save American lives, and were allowed here under a temporary protected status. Well, now we learn that status is not going to be renewed.
You know, I watched I still watch a podcast. It's pretty chuddy. I do not watch it for the politics. It's called PKA. And years and years and years ago, when I was a teenager, they actually had a guest on who was an Afghan in Afghanistan who lived in Kabul while the U.S. was occupying the country, meaning that, like, he was more or less living a pretty Western-coded life, you know? He was on a American podcast, just kind of chilling, playing games on Twitch and stuff like that. Not really an option as much anymore, unless you have the endorsement of the Taliban, I guess. But this guy had trained a bunch of U.S. soldiers. He was a translator, and he taught U.S. soldiers fundamental, basic language skills to be able to, like, get around and understand things and get by. And he had a lot of interesting stories and stuff because he did travel around and whatnot. But it's like, he was such a cool fucking dude. He was such a cool fucking dude. And yeah, like, I think there was like a whole... No, they made a movie about it, didn't they? Didn't they make a movie about... Yeah, I watched it. It was called The Covenant, and it starred Jake Gyllenhaal. And it was about Afghan translators and people who assisted the U.S. military getting hunted and putting, like, they had bounties on their heads. Like, the Taliban put bounties on their heads, and they had to, like, escape or die. But yeah, I hope that guy ended up being okay, come to think of it. Fuck, I had not made that connection. They made a whole movie about what happens to those people. Fuck. White South African persecuted? I find that hard to believe from a country that created apartheid. Well, like I said, that's the whole basis of this. It's a complete lie. It's a myth.
Next week, according to the Department of Homeland Security, which means many who helped save.
Yeah, for those who don't know, every one of these conspiracies the right pushes is based on something tangentially kind of true. Allow me to explain. I brought this up earlier, but the classic Trump quote, "They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats." Do you want to know where that came from? His claim that Haitian migrants were eating dogs and cats off the street, which Vance eventually admitted was a lie, and they dropped it, and that's been well buried, and everyone forgets about it. But regardless, what ended up happening was a video went viral on Twitter of a woman in the street eating a dead animal. I believe it was a dog or a cat. Maybe it was like a goose or something. It was one of the three. And the video was incorrectly captioned as taken and the events happening in Springfield, Ohio. It was falsely reported the video was taken recently, when it was in fact a couple years old. And the video itself didn't even take place in Springfield, Ohio. It took place in, like, several states over. Now, the idea that this woman was a Haitian migrant, I kid you not, nothing in this video whatsoever would indicate that, besides the fact that she was black. That is it. She was a black woman who seemed to be, I think, having a mental breakdown and eating an animal in the street. She was an American citizen, I believe. Yep, that was confirmed, if I'm not mistaken. And the right just decided, we can pass off the lie that she's a Haitian immigrant. Fuck it. And they did. And so that video was the basis of the lie. And so when you tried to debunk the lie that Haitian immigrants were eating dogs, they at least had one clip from which they could say, you can deny it as much as you want, but there are videos. We know something's going on, even if you don't want to talk about it. And they can play up this idea that something is going on, and the lack of evidence is what's suspicious, not that the lack of evidence is a sign that what they believe is complete nonsense. And so, and I believe, by the way, it's the core of the right-wing mindset, by the way. A lack of evidence is not a sign that they may be on the wrong path. A lack of evidence is suspicious. That, like, the right path, which they're already on, of course, is trying to be, like, the left or something is trying to divert them off of the right path. That's why there's no evidence for what they believe in. You know, it's their faith is being shaken. Obviously, that's quite comparable to Christianity, frankly. But, you know, that aside. Comparing, like, that situation with the Haitian migrants eating dogs story to this story, just for a point of comparison, there are actually instances from which they are basing this conspiracy. Now, if you live way out in the country, you and your family live on a farm, and it's a country with immense poverty, at some point, somewhere in that country, probably a few dozen times, statistically speaking, over a sizable chunk of time, there are going to be some gruesome, violent crimes committed by poor people on rich people. It's going to happen, you know? And this has happened. There have been cases where black South Africans have murdered white South Africans. There have been murders. They occur. Violent crimes happen, believe it or not. I believe there's been, like, in the last 12 years, 7 killings. Maybe, like, it's either 7 or 17. And we're not that's, like, literally nothing. That is just crime. That's literally poor on rich crime. That's violent, right? That is not a genocide. In no universe is that a genocide. But the fact that there are anecdotal stories they can pull from, and it's funny how we started this segment talking about how Lauren Southern popularized this conspiracy. One of her most iconic quotes was, "Data is just the plural of anecdote," an argument she made to justify why, in response to data being used to debunk her position, she was just repeatedly trying to evoke anecdotal stories of things she'd seen to debunk the claim that was being backed up with data, which was embarrassing as fuck. Like, so statistically, all this research and like peer-reviewed data shows that your claim is wrong. Well, when I went there, I saw this. It's like, you look stupid. And she did. But the right is really good at just warping the narrative. When you hold them to it, their narratives can fall apart. But they're really good at being slippery these days.
U.S. lives may be deported starting in July. Joining us now is New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof. Nick, you say this whole situation upside down. The idea that there's a genocide of white farmers. I mean, why do you think the Trump administration is doing this?
Well, I mean, he's completely turned refugee policy upside down in ways that reflect racial discrimination. I mean, he's not, the Afrikaner farmers are not suffering from that. It is true that some have been murdered, but black farmers have been murdered at even higher rates. And
that is true.
There's a huge crime rate. Crime rate in South Africa. Crime is a huge problem.
It is not, in fact, genocide when there is any amount of poor people committing violent crime against rich people in a country. That is not a genocide. And just because all the rich people are white and all the poor people in South Africa are black does not mean that when poor people kill rich people, it's a race-related crime or a race-focused crime. That is what they're trying to push, though.
But according to organizations there, there's been no forcible taking back of confiscation of land at this point.
Not at all. And, it is true that there was legislation passed in January that theoretically creates an opportunity to confiscate some land without compensation. That has not been implemented. Nobody has had their land taken away. And, these Afrikaners are among the most privileged people on the entire continent. They are
on the whole fucking planet. They are literally like, if there has ever been a group of people born into the most privileged situation possible for where they are on the planet, it is white Afrikaners in South Africa. They are like, it is a small population, a relatively small population of statistically overwhelmingly well-off people surrounded by a sea of overwhelmingly like slum level poor people. It is that bad. They are extremely privileged. Most of them have known absolutely no hard work in their lives. And now they're coming to America to be greeted as if they're victims. Like, there's actually never been a more spoiled brat, like, demographic on the planet. And I'm not trying to talk shit to my fans out there that are from South Africa. You probably agree with what I'm saying here. This is a very unique demographic of people with a really fucked up history that's gotten them in such a privileged position. And now they're trying to cement even more power. And on top of that, sympathy by playing the victim on top of all of it.
They are assets, or the white South Africans have assets 20 times greater than those of black South Africans on average.
By the way, if black South Africans wanted to genocide all the white people and take what they have, you would think white people only being 7% of the country, it would have happened a long time ago. They would have finished the job, like a decade ago. Like, how the fuck does 90+% of a country not deal with 7% of a country when they apparently are on full genocide mode? Come on. Like, that makes no goddamn sense logistically. Like, where they are. Just you go to the mansions. That's where all the white people are. Why hasn't that happened? Why is it only like 7 people who've been killed?
And, you just mentioned Sudan, the world's probably worst humanitarian crisis right now. In Sudan, I wonder how many black people those white Afrikaners' ancestors killed. The white Afrikaners are the ancestors of the people who literally, like, lived on the African coast, operating, like, the 24/7 nonstop, like, out-shipping of enslaved human beings. They made immense amounts of money off of slave labor on the African continent, exporting slave labor via human trafficking, and that wealth solidified through generational wealth in a country that they basically decided the borders of, the rules of, the laws of, and subjugated the people of. And now, in a relatively modern time frame, there has been some level of social and political equality on paper, but the effects of that immense level of equality historically is a really deep scar that will likely take well over 100 years to heal. Like, it'll probably be 100 years from now before South Africa is in a comparable situation to America. Easily 100 years. In a man who had his eyes gouged out as a reflection of that genocide with a bayonet. In Congo, which you also mentioned, I saw children who were gang raped because of their ethnicity. That is the world's worst mass atrocity since World War II. In Myanmar, I talked to a Rohingya mom who had her baby pulled from her arms and thrown into a bonfire. That is...
Who remembers when Trump called these places shithole countries? But if you're white, then you get the fast track here and U.S. tax dollars paying for your benefits.
Plausibly a genocide. But none of those people have any right to be accepted to come to the U.S. as refugees. And instead we bring in, a group of people who don't remotely qualify as refugees. But what distinguishes them is that they are white. And as the son of a refugee, I just find this makes a mockery of the entire principle of refugee status.
Also, the U.S. actually cut off its economic assistance to South Africa over this as well. So it's not just not letting black South Africans in or other people from other parts of the continent. There's now a cutoff of aid for HIV medication. I think South Africa gets about 7.
Isn't it clever how the right have used a made-up conspiracy to justify an on-paper policy to export specifically white people into the country? Because remember, black South Africans do not have the benefits here. It is exclusive to white South Africans, whom the right are arguing are uniquely at risk of being genocided, right? And so they're being brought in with a fast track and all the benefits exclusively because they're white. But they're not just outright saying we're only bringing in white people because white good. They're saying a made-up narrative about how they're in danger, and that's why these only white people, specifically specified on paper only white people, are allowed in with special treatment. They literally did whites only and managed to play it off as like sympathetic and noble. Like, think about it for a second. They literally did a whites only policy on immigration on paper, straight up, openly, publicly. We all know it's whites only, and they played it off as noble with this lie.
17% of their of the money that they use for HIV treatment in South Africa comes from the U.S.
And that, as you know, has happened across the continent, that there are kids dying right now across the African continent because they can't get emergency food aid, which costs maybe $70 to save a child's life, because they can't get AIDS medication, which costs 12 cents a day. We can't afford that, but we were willing, America was, to provide a plane to bring 49 Afrikaners, white privileged Afrikaners, to the United States and give them expedited refugee status, when meanwhile there are 12,000 other people who have already been approved and gone through a multi-year screening and have flights booked. In some cases, these Afghans who saved the lives of American troops, and now they're held off, and we're not admitting them.
You may recall that on the day he was...
Man, this story is fucking sickening. Honestly, it is. That when you see people, really at the end of the day, it's cry bullying. And nothing makes me feel more sick to my stomach than a cry bully who's getting exactly what they want. It genuinely just makes my guts churn, and I can't stand it. I really can't stand cry bullies, and that's what this is. This is just a perfect example of cry bullying. Like Israel, yeah, it's pretty comparable. Well, to be fair, Israel does get attacked, its civilians do get attacked, but Israel also tends to do, it's like Israel's with a baseball bat, whacking Palestine in the back of the head, and then Palestine kicks Israel in the nuts, and then Israel pulls out a gun. Yeah, it's okay, all right, yeah, it's pretty sickening. Anyway, though, listen, if you watch this far into the video and you want to see more from me, let me know that you enjoyed this video, and to support the channel, please consider leaving a like and, the thumbs up and a comment. It really does help a lot. In fact, consider commenting down below to let me know you watched this far. What would be a good code word? How about this? I vote asteroid. Just comment that. I vote asteroid. Because at this point, we need it. We need the asteroid. I welcome it. I vote asteroid. Comment that down below if you watch this far to let me know you've enjoyed the video and that you, got all the way to the end. And it helps a lot. The algorithm really does rely on engagement. And of course, if you want to see more from me in the future, if you want to see when I upload new videos and whenever I go live, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell icon to turn on all notifications so YouTube actually tells you when I go live or upload new videos in the future. And of course, if you want to see more from me on other platforms, be sure to follow all my other social medias linked down below, including my Discord server. It is the main hub of my community and fan base. And on top of that, I host gaming events, call-in streams, watch parties, and movie nights there every Friday. You really don't want to miss it, so make sure you join. Link down below, of course. And if you want to support me directly, financially, you want to help me keep the lights on and a roof above my head here at the Xander Hall studio, then please consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live. Or you can also support me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, StreamElements, Patreon, or you can buy some custom Xander Hall merch through the Streamlabs link down below. Regardless of how you support me, though, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.